Do you need to burp your baby? Maybe. Let's find out. Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Amna Husain, board certified pediatrician, board certified lactation consultant, and mom. Today we're going to be asking the question, do you need to burp your baby? What's the evidence and is it really helpful? So I feel like burping your baby is one of those things that's taught in every class when it comes to taking care of a newborn, and it's always told to you and you must probably do it. It kind of goes hand in hand with like changing a diaper. Like, you know you're supposed to change a diaper, so you know you have to burp your baby. But you may not always have to burp your baby. Let me explain. Burping is very helpful mostly in the beginning couple of months of your baby's life. Once your baby's able to move, for example, roll over or even sit up, your baby may not need to be burped. In fact, they might actually burp themselves. Why does your child need to be burped? Because when they're really swallowing milk, and we'll get into the different methods that a baby will be fed and how that affects burping, but when your baby's swallowing formula or milk, they are potentially also taking in air. Now, the baby's stomach is pretty small in the first couple of days to weeks of life. When they take in so much air, it can impact the way they feel, so they can feel a little bit of distension in the stomach or tummy area, and also may impact how well they're able to feed. So if they're really struggling, they might be crying, they're not really able to feed comfortably, they might need to be burped. Thirdly, it might impact how much milk they take in. So sometimes babies, when they're a little bit more comfortable, they're actually able to feed a little bit longer and better. So in the couple of first days to weeks to maybe even months of life, I think burping can be helpful. So that means probably with around 4 to 6 months, you might find that you don't need to burp your baby. But not every baby follows the rule book. And if you have a child who really benefits from burping, then maybe at 4 months you are still burping your child, or at 6 months. But I want you to know that usually when they're able to move freely and mobilize that air, they may not need to be burped. Now, when it comes to feeding your baby, there are so many, first of all, bottles out there on the market. Anti-colic bottles, bottles that help you take in less air, different feeding methods, all of those things. But when your baby is feeding at the breast, there is some idea in theory that perhaps they're not taking in as much air, so they don't need to burp as often. Now, my personal take on this is it depends. If you're someone who has a fast letdown or you have an oversupply, perhaps your baby is constantly pulling off and getting back on and pulling off and getting back on. And in that instance, they are taking in more air, and that breastfed baby does still need to be burped. But if you have a baby who is able to feed pretty consistently and not really have any interruptions, maybe nighttime might be a good time for this, because your milk supply might be a little bit slower, or your baby's able to really regulate their feeding patterns a little bit better. But generally, sometimes at that time, like at night, you may not need to burp your baby. So take that with a grain of salt. This is just something personally that I've seen, and some data that we have in terms of breastfeeding and just milk supply and milk letdown and how it varies throughout the day. When it comes to a baby crying, let's say a baby crying from hunger, or a baby crying from needing to be burped, or a baby crying for whatever reason, babies cry for all types of reasons, they are going to be taking in more air at that time as well. So you might find that you're still needing to burp your baby pretty frequently. When it comes to bottle feeding your baby, bottles are a very tricky situation because there is some gimmicky, I think, and catchy phrases out there, and it's hard to know whether one bottle is better for your baby than another until you really try it. So just like sippy cups, if you're like me, you had a ton of them and then you realize, aha, this one clicked and it worked for you. But when it comes to you and your baby and the bottle that you're using, you'll know best which one really allows them to feed themselves better and perhaps either get a really good burp in, or maybe has too fast of a flow and really prevents them from feeding well. One of my favorite techniques when bottle feeding a breastfed baby is doing paste bottle feeding. Now, if you'd like a video on paste bottle feeding, make sure you comment below. I use this for both of my daughters when it came to bottle feeding. But when you are paste bottle feeding, do know that it does make them swallow more air. So I do frequently, regularly burp my little one when I'm bottle feeding her, because again, I use paced bottle feeding, and again, that allows them to take in more air. So to make sure that they're comfortable, I do regularly and frequently burp. So that's important to know, not just when you're breastfeeding, but also bottle feeding and choosing how you're going to bottle feed a baby. So when it comes to burping, what are all the different ways to burp a baby? Well, there's 3 primary, most frequently used methods, and I'll actually demonstrate those on my daughter's little baby doll. But one of them would be right up here over the shoulder. Now, this is the most popular method. I'm going to turn to the side so you can see, but actually the stomach should be pretty up high. So over the shoulder, so that you're kind of having that counter pressure. I like this method as well because if your little one's a spit upper, like my second baby was, it kind of like falls over and doesn't really come always over your shirt. That being said, sometimes it's really hard to get your baby all the way up here, especially if they're a dead weight and they have gotten sleepy or fallen asleep while nursing. So sometimes, of course, I do have my little one right here. Make sure you have your burp cloth right here too, so they don't spit up all over your shirt. But you can absolutely try and burp them over the shoulder and provide that counter pressure. Firm pressure, usually I recommend up high, not necessarily on the bottom, because too much of padding on the bottom will jostle them and then might actually lead to more spitting up. Now the second method, and this is my personal favorite, you can actually see that this is my knee and baby's going to actually be sitting on my lap and sitting up. Now a baby who's a young newborn needs quite a bit of neck support in the beginning days, so you would hold basically baby up here and then hold their neck forward right here with a good supportive hold around the chin. Usually I put my hands in a C hold and kind of have them right underneath the ears, sort of where the mandible or the jaw is, and then a couple of firm pats as well. Now this works really well in my opinion when your baby is paced bottle feeding, because usually you have them sitting upright while they're feeding, so put the bottle down and then you kind of can prop them up and boop, the burp comes right out. Now the last method is not really my favorite, and that's probably why I'm teaching it last, but you would actually have the baby laying down and you would have them laying across your lap. So again, if my knees are right here, then you would have your baby laying down and then be patting them firmly. The reason I don't like this one is I feel like it leads to more vomiting. I also find that many babies are not big fans of it, and so you just have a baby who cries mostly. So when it comes to that and a baby is crying and resisting a burp, what do? You kind of have to troubleshoot a little bit. You might have to walk around a little bit because the change of pace and change of scenery allows them to relax and you can burp them. Or you might need to feed them a little bit more so that they have a little bit of a full stomach before you get into burping them. All right, I hope that answers a lot of your burping questions. If you have other questions below, make sure you comment, share this video with somebody if you found it helpful, and make sure you subscribe. I'll see you next week. Bye.